here today to talk to you. I got it. It's okay with me that it records about AT assessment and where do we start? It's a topic near and dear to my heart, and I was pleased when Kathy asked me to talk with you today. I've got a lot to say and only an hour to say it, so I am going to move rather quickly, but I want to start with asking you what, okay, let's see if I can get this to go to slide 2. There it is. I want to know what happens now in your setting when a student needs an AT assessment. And you can put that in the chat. We may not have time to share it all, but I have Kathy and Stacy both here today working with me, and hopefully we will get some answers. Because I want you to think about what your situation is now as we move on to talking about what it could be and what tools might be helpful to you in changing the way things are. When I thought about how to talk about where do I start, I was like, oh gosh, this is such a big topic. But to me, AT assessment is kind of an ongoing cyclical thing. And what we have to look at is, well, where can we get started on this information gathering and decision making that we need to do? So here's my favorite little schematic. I hope it doesn't drive you crazy, but I wanted to think about that there's a series of things that we need to address. And the first ones occur right after there's a referral, whether that's a request from a parent or a request from a teacher, but someone thinks that we should look at the need for assistive technology for this child, and the child doesn't currently have that as part of their special education program. So somebody, and this could easily be a case manager, so it could be a single person at this point, looking at, well, what's our specific concern? Because we cannot answer the question, does this child need AT, until we know for what, because it's all about the task that that child needs to do in their daily environment. So once we know that concern and we can focus in on that, then someone needs to think about who are the team members that we need? What kind of information do we need? Where and when will we get it? And so having a case manager can really make that efficient. Now, I know that in Wisconsin, based on memo 22.02, that every AT assessment requires initiating a special education reevaluation. So I want to remind you that, of course, you have to follow all the natural due process procedures that we do for any special ed reeval. So you're going to need to follow the timeline that your district uses. We're going to have parents' signatures, parents' involvement. So I want you to keep that as the larger framework. And what I want to talk about today is within that, what are the things that we need to do to really find out what assistive technology might help a child? So we'll go out and do some information gathering once we've had those preliminary decisions, and then we'll really gather information, bring it together and analyze it and make some potential decisions. Then we'll have some trials, one or more trials, to see what works, and then we'll make some final decisions. So that's sort of the overview of the process that I use. And like I said, when I thought of it, I was like, do I talk about the team first? Do I talk about the process first? So tried to give you a little bit of a sense of the process as I see it. And now let's talk about that team, because we know that the law clearly tells us who has to be on an IEP team. And I know you have district procedures that tell you who should be involved in a student's reevaluation. In addition to that, or as part of your thinking, I want you to have this concept, and that is that the student is the core. The student needs to be part of this process as much as possible. And I know we're talking from very young to more mature students, and that their participation will vary depending on their abilities, but that student and or the parent representing that student and supporting that student need to be part of this. Don't ever do any of your AT assessment procedures without the student and the parent as the core and as active parts of that. But then we need to think about, we need someone who knows the curriculum, because we know that our goal is for this child to be making progress in the curriculum and participating in the activities. If there's any kind of a concern at all about language, as there often is, we need someone who knows language development. That may well be a speech and language pathologist, but it could be a teacher, the hearing impaired if our child has a hearing loss. There's lots of people that can fulfill that role. And the same with motor development. If there are any motor concerns, I would want someone to be part of that team who has knowledge about motor development and interventions. So it might be an OT or a PT or an adaptive PE specialist, whoever is there in your environment that might be working with a student and that knows the kinds of things we need them to know to bring to this meeting. We need somebody to commit district resources. And then you do need someone, if possible, who knows a little bit about assistive technology, but they don't have to be a huge expert, because what they can do is go out into this world and connect with some resources. And we'll talk more about those folks as we go along. Now, I want to throw something out to you to make you think again about who else needs to be there. And that is, there's not a ton of research about assistive technology, but there are some things that say to us that staff members who are not included in the assessment process tend not to use the assistive technology with a student as the assessment team intended. And so we really need to look at having staff members who will be working with a child, who will be supporting the AT use, be part of this decision-making process. It means they're more likely to implement the AT as we intended it to be implemented. The second thing I want you to think about as you put together your team to do this AT assessment is that successful use of AT devices is really based on that student believing in their own capacity and believing that the assistive technology really helps them. So looking at the student perspective and looking at all the research on AT abandonment, if it's not used, it gets abandoned. And so this has to be used throughout their day for important tasks in their customary environments. So it can't just be an AT specialist and an OT and one teacher making all these decisions and not being part of the team that will be supporting that student's use. So my point is that classroom teacher where the AT will be used really needs to be part of this team. Throughout your assessment and throughout my talk, I'll always keep the SET framework in mind. I hope most of you know that Student Environment Task and Tools acronym that we use. It was developed by my dear friend Joyce Abala way back in 1994, just to remind us, it isn't about hearing about a new tool and saying, oh, I want to try that with all these different kids. It's about looking at the student and the environment and the task before we think about a tool. I included several handouts. We had some technical difficulties, so I don't know if you have access to them all yet, but I know you will have because Kathy and Stacy have made that commitment. The first one is called the Assistive Technology Assessment Planner. And I really like it because it has just a nice sequence of the kind of steps we have to take as we set up this and plan for this assessment. And I like thinking about when I'm going to get it done and who's going to do it. So there's nothing written in stone about this. You can certainly delete or add things to it, but I think it's a nice starting point for us when we think about, well, where do I start? And I have to make sure all these things happen. So, and that came out of the quality indicators for assistive technology work that we've done, and it's available on the QIAT website, qiat.org. I'll leave you with that at the end too. The process I'm going to talk about today, and again, I said I'm going to zip through it. I'm going to give you just a little overview. But if you really want to learn more and don't mind listening to me for a little longer, you can go to the AT Internet modules from OCALI. And OCALI is the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence. They have just a fabulous resource available to all of us. I hope you know about it, but if you don't, I'm thrilled to introduce you to it. It has within it a whole series of AT Internet modules, and you go and sign up for this. It's safe to sign up. They will not do anything with your name or contact information. You can stay logged in so you can get back to it quickly, and you'll find just a wealth of information there. And the one about using the WADI assessment process is me talking in more depth about what I'm going to talk to you today. So it's a resource for you if your head is whirling after we chat for an hour. So when I was thinking about this for today, I thought about, okay, that assessment planner is quite long and has a whole bunch of steps. Let's narrow it down. And so I've looked at about 9 steps that I see as the process for completing an AT assessment, starting with identifying and defining the area of concern, because we need to know what it is the student is struggling with, and gathering information related to that. So your second handout number 2, is called the Student Information Guide. It's from Wadi. Now it's 31 pages, and I want you to hear this, please, please, so important. You would never use all 31 pages. That was never the idea. When we first started with Wadi, way back, actually 30 years ago this fall, and we looked at, well, why don't school districts do their AT assessments already? I went around the state of Wisconsin and I talked to people in dozens of districts. And what I found out was that they didn't know the questions to ask and they didn't know the tools that were available. So the whole Wadi process is based on helping you get the questions to ask, because often you know the answer. What you don't know is, where do I start with what questions? So the Student Information Guide is that starting point. And the first page is just student data, their name, address, age, all that stuff. The second page helps you start to focus in on, what is it that we're really concerned about? What is the task that the student is struggling with? And it asks you to figure that out and then look at the other sections of the Student Information Guide, and you would only complete the one or two related to the area of concern. So my plan here was to have you take a quick look at the Student Information Guide. If you have access to your handouts, it's handout number 2, but let me show you 2 more slides here. I put up just a couple of the pages in those sections. So section 3 is the computer and device access, and section 7 is just about math. My goal for you is to look at this and get a sense of the kinds of information that it helps you organize. So I'll just stop talking for just a second and let you take a look either at this screen or at your handout.